So if fire suppression makes fires worse, then why do we do it? Well, wildfires are big business. And cousin, business is a boomin'. When you hear that the California wildfires cost billions of dollars, it's not like they just burned a stack of money. That money went somewhere. Every helicopter in the sky costs a lot of money. In fact, it's around 10 grand an hour. And the air tankers are even more. Every retardant drop from a VLAT costs north of $65,000 per bust. And they drop that shit like the expiration date is tomorrow. The Forest Service spends nearly $100 million a year on retardant. And it all goes to one private company. Fire aviation costs millions of dollars every day in peak fire season. And many of the ships are contracted out by private companies. They even have a 747. Thousands of miles of hose get used up every year. In 2020, they had a nationwide fire hose shortage. Every lunch, every Gatorade, marked up to government cost. The California Department of Corrections has a great racket. They use cheap prison labor to manufacture their equipment, but they bill at government cost. Why? Well, why not? It's not their money. It's yours. And it's not just the suppression costs. Destruction means transactions. How much money does a hardware store make off your house if it's just sitting there year after year? Well, how much money do you think they make when it burns to the ground? You think the car salesmen are distraught that they have to sell thousands of brand new cars every year because the ones they just sold you all burned up in a wildfire? Every burned out car means a new one is sold. Every leveled house means a new one is built. Contractors, labor, permits, building supplies, furniture, wiring, utilities. Every power pole has to be replaced by men working overtime with hazard pay. The wildfire industrial complex is a $12 billion a year industry in California alone. That's bigger than porn. And in a way, it is porn. Media clowns flock to wildfires like moths to a flame. They plant themselves in front of a raging headfire for the cool shot, and then have to run for their lives when it outflanks them. They overhype the intensity of the incidents for their fire porn, staging shots to heighten the drama for their unsuspecting viewers, doing multiple takes to get the ominous tone just right. Oftentimes, you'll find more fire pornographers than firefighters. And they cheer when homes burn up, and are visibly disappointed when a neighborhood is saved. They really only profit when your life has been destroyed on camera. Sometimes the firefighters like to tease the pornographers by pretending to do some hotlining, to trick them into racing over and raising their cameras. talking heads with all the gravitas of an underwear model will cry out loud that everything you are seeing is unprecedented. It's not. There is no new kind of magical fire behavior that didn't exist before.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Good evening. Welcome to Man on Fire. America, yes, America has sued Southern California Edison, the utility company, over the Eaton Fire, and yet they haven't even established a cause? How does that work? Well, as you know, since I'm half Jewish, technically my birth certificate counts as a law degree, so I'm going to go through that with you guys. What else do we have going on? If you spend a whole bunch of money on something and that something never happens, what do we think about what happens with that money? Maybe there's a reason I played that intro today. Speaking of the wildfire industrial complex, where's the money, Lebowski? Where is the money, Lebowski? Also, did it really matter that the San Ynez Reservoir was empty before the Palisades fire? Did it matter? I guess we'll find out. I have a very interesting video that I'm going to show you guys that I created myself just to demonstrate whether or not that reservoir being empty had an impact on the fire. On top of that, we were told that the permits for rebuilding in the Palisades were being fast-tracked. Apparently, a whole bunch of red tape has been cut. The permits are getting fast-tracked, and we've been panicking over nothing. Or have we? The answer may surprise you, or will it? Now, we start at 805 because I happen to have an 805 area code. And that is the most elite area code on planet Earth. Just so you know, it's Oprah's area code. So I want to see what area codes you guys have. What do you think is the most elite area code in the United States? Is it 917? Do you think it's 818? I bet you dirty bums in the valley think it's 818. Well, it's not. It's 805. I want to see what area codes you think are good. So anyway, let's dig into the wildfire industrial complex. Now, there was a new contract established for Perimeter Solutions. That is, of course, the private company that manufactures the fire retardant that they drop like Kool-Aid out of the sky. That's the gender reveal that they do over every wildfire in California, and California goes nuts with this stuff. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars every single year on fire retardant, and it all comes from Perimeter Solutions. What's been going on with Perimeter Solutions? Now, the news has been well received. Dude, this is so crazy. The growth on this stock over the last year has been absolutely insane. Let's zoom out. Look at this. The wildfire industrial complex is real. I played that clip for a reason. Here's the problem. I'm sure a bunch of you guys ran out and bought Perimeter Solutions, right? You probably thought, oh man, this thing's a winner, and they just got a new Fed contract. Careful. There is a new type of fire suppressant that's been developed out of Maine that's made out of wood, and it is PFAS free. Now, PFAS, these are the forever chemicals that are giving everybody cancer. Now, there is a concern with Phos-Chek, with that fire retardant, that it has some environmental issues. I don't think it's been established that it necessarily causes cancer. What they have found that it does create problems with riparian areas. It will cause toxic algae blooms. It can disrupt the wildlife in these aquatic areas. And so typically they have exclusion zones around major waterways where pilots aren't supposed to drop this stuff. It's usually like 100 to 200 feet away from waterways. But the reality is the stuff washes off uphill. It all runs downhill. It eventually gets into the waterways and it works its way down through the aquatic ecosystem. So technically, the use of Perimeter Solutions product, PhosCheck, is banned. It is banned by the EPA. They have carved out an exemption for the emergent use on wildfires. So it's actually only being used on an exception. So this contract does hang in the balance. Now, this new development, what they've done is they've ground up wood pulp into this almost like a powder, like the level of fine powder that Gavin likes to snort up his nose, but it's wood, okay? It's a different kind of plant. It's not the coca leaf. Now, it creates this like cellulose style watery goo, and they can add more water to it to make it a little less viscous so they can pump it through a hose, or they can make it as viscous as they want. Now, the way that they tested it here is they tested it on these sticks. Now, I don't think this is a good demonstration because these things they're tough to light on fire in the first place. Even with these propane torches, like you need to put this on like brush. Put this on brush and then I'll be convinced that it works. But what they showed was that it actually resisted fire very, very significantly. Very significantly. So people are celebrating this as maybe a hopeful development because typically, in these aircraft, when they're not using retardant, they're using that AFFF, the aqueous film forming foam, which 100% has been linked to cancer. There are major lawsuits, especially for naval guys in the Navy who use this stuff on the deck and they do their fire suppression drills and they're getting cancer like crazy. The other thing that we know is that firefighters are getting cancer like crazy, not just because of the exposure to the chemicals that they experience on these fires, but the stuff in their Nomex. The stuff in their Nomex is a problem. And those things are full of PFAS chemicals. There is a movement to try to get them to change or be allowed to wear wool clothing instead of that Nomex stuff, because as you sweat, as you sort of decompose that material in the armpit, so like if you are getting this stuff soaking into the axilla or in the crotch, that's another area where you have a lot of friction, so you have a lot of breakdown of those fabrics, guess what you're gonna get? Well, in the axilla, you are gonna get breast cancer, and men can get that. But more concerning is in the crotch. Obviously, you are going to get reproductive issues and potentially testicular cancer. So this is a big concern. PFAS chemicals are a big concern. So I like that we are looking into different options, okay? I don't think this is practical. So guess what, SuperPav? You can make your dividends in peace. I don't think PhosCheck's going anywhere, brother. And what we know about the way that government works, it works very, very, very slowly. This idea that we're suddenly going to switch it up with PhosCheck, it ain't happening. So SuperPav, you can enjoy your dividends. You're curious why U.S. Forest Service signed a multi-year agreement with PRM if National Wildfire Service starts 2026. Well, you can take a wild, swinging ass guess at why they would sign a multi-year contract a week ahead of the report that will effectively establish the National Wildfire Service, which is being set up by a fire aviator, a guy who runs used to run, and he's divested from, a private fire aviation company. Why on earth would they lock in a contract with a private aviation supply company? I don't know. You guys figure that out. But like I said, government moves slowly, so of course they're not going to switch it up. The idea that they would test this new stuff in any meaningful timeline is ridiculous because government moves slowly. Now, on that note, government has sued. America has sued. The United States of America, you have sued Southern California Edison. We have found over and over, it's these California utility companies that are responsible for the worst fires, except for the Palisades fire. Although they still have some liability there because they had secondary ignitions. But as far as the Eaton Fire goes, the US of A has sued Southern California Edison. We've got a video report on it. I also have the lawsuit. We're going to take some excerpts of it. The interesting thing about this lawsuit, they haven't determined a cause. They're suing Southern California Edison without actually determining a cause of the fire. Now, we've been guessing what caused the fire for all this time. And this is why we don't focus on the Eaton Fire that much, because it's very straightforward. But what's very interesting is in this lawsuit, they still don't have a cause. Just it goes to show you how slowly these things move. And I know I said this a lot in previous live streams where I said, typically, if you haven't seen a cause determined for a fire in a couple of weeks or a couple of days, it's because someone or some agency was liable for the fire who can pay the restitution, right? So that's going to be a fire agency, a state agency, or a major utility player like this. If it's just a wizard, if it's an arsonist, they're just going to frog march them right away. Those people can't pay, right? There's never going to be a lawsuit settlement on that, ever, okay? So they just wrap it up. My experience with the dense mustache of justice on these fires, these fire investigators, they know what started it within like 90 seconds of getting there. That's been my experience with every fire investigator I've ever spoken to on scene. And they're very careful. They never say anything explicitly, but you can just watch where their eyes are pointing, right? And that's how I knew what caused the Silverado fire. Fire investigator was very disciplined. He didn't say anything, but I saw where he was looking. And there was a coil from a phone line cable that had somehow in the wind wrapped itself around the electrical line. That's what started the fire. The Thomas Fire, for example. Firefighters on the Thomas Fire were telling me what started it on day one of that fire. They did not get restitution. They did not find an official cause for a year because, of course, it was power lines. I believe that was Southern California Edison again. So it takes a long, long time, even though they know the cause. Let's watch this piece on what happened.
Although the investigation into the cause of the Eaton Fire is still underway, never before seen photos and videos obtained by Eyewitness News backs up the leading theory that the fire started under Southern California Edison transmission lines in the hills above Pasadena next to Altadena. The Department of Justice says they're so sure SCE is responsible that they filed a lawsuit Thursday seeking damages.
Based on the evidence that we have and Edison's own statements in its recent SEC filing that there's no other apparent cause for the fire, we're confident and we are comfortable moving forward with the lawsuit at this point.
We saw what happened with our own eyes, and we're not the only ones. If that tower had been properly, removed when it should have been, and I don't know how much it would have cost to do it at that time, but it would have been a hell of a lot cheaper than what happened.
It's clearly under a tower. So, yeah, that seems like a pretty big indication to me.
4 months after the Eaton Fire, 2 towers, part of the investigation, were removed via helicopter, sent to a warehouse to undergo lab testing. The lawsuit seeks more than $40 million in damages, and the federal government says they'll make sure, if successful, costs aren't passed on to ratepayers. The DOJ filed another lawsuit against SCE for starting the Fairview Fire in Hemet back in 2022.
Fire season's coming up again. We want Edison to change the way it does business. It does not maintain its infrastructure in a way to prevent.
I love how Daniel Firecopter chimed in the chat right before they said that SCE was on the hook for the Fairview Fire that killed a couple people. And he's like, hey, remember that happened in Hemet? Dude's on top of things, man. I swear. For a helicopter, I don't know how he knows all this stuff. It's crazy. Maybe it's because he's got a computer microchip in his brain. So this is an interesting little piece. So they, like right out of the gates, they say they're still investigating the cause. Dude, how long does it take? They're doing lab tests on the tower for 9 months? 9 months. Really? Does it really take that long? Of course it doesn't take that long. They are trying to get their ducks in a row. The other thing they're trying to do is they are trying to delay any restitution for as long as possible. So SoCal Edison is doing this. What they have, thanks to Gavin Newsom, is they have the Wildfire Recovery Fund, which is basically a taxpayer-funded slush fund where they understand that these utility companies that Gavin Newsom always lobbies for, they are going to kill a certain amount of people every single year through negligence. By not maintaining their equipment, they're going to start the most wildfires, whether that's the Camp Fire, that was PG&E, the Thomas Fire, the Fairview Fire killed a couple people. It's like the amount of fires caused by these utility companies and the really, really, really bad ones, it's like immeasurable. So they have a slush fund that you paid for in order to pay out the victims. But what they do is they're basically going to try to throw out a low ball number right out of the gates. So for all the folks who don't want to endure the pain of trying to rebuild in Los Angeles, they're going to be tempted to take the money from that fund. And it's going to be a low ball offer. What they need to do is they need to hold out. They need to hold out for the lawsuit because they are entitled to so much more. That wildfire recovery fund is going to be entirely depleted. And what's going to end up happening is SoCal Edison is going to force you to cover the cost of their liability by raising your rates. And Gavin Newsom made that possible. He made it possible for them to pass their liability onto you, the ratepayer. It is super insulting. But now, to be clear, when America is suing SoCal Edison, they are not doing so on behalf of you and your stuff. Because guess what? The U.S. Forest Service, their mission actually is not to protect all these homes, even though we applied this standard to them. Like they're supposed to be on the hook for all these homes that were pushing right up against the wildlands, even though the feds have no control over jurisdiction. They have no control over permitting, planning, zoning, putting these homes in danger right next to the forest. The U.S. Forest Service is responsible for the trees, and that's it. And SoCal Edison had their equipment on their property, and they made a mess. So what is America suing for? According to the lawsuit, SCE's ongoing internal review into the facts and circumstances of the Eaton Fire is complex and will require significant time. SCE's review includes ongoing inspections of its facilities and records and third-party information and testing. What do they really need to test? We know that there was a derelict tower that needed to be removed or replaced or repaired. We know that the fire came from one ignition point, so you can isolate it. They also found that there were faults along that line. What else do we need to know? Does it really take 9 months? Really? Give me a break. While SCE has not conclusively determined that its equipment caused the ignition of the Eaton Fire, concerning circumstantial evidence suggests that SCE's transmission facilities in the preliminary area of origin could have been associated with the ignition of the fire. Additionally, SCE is not aware of evidence pointing to another possible source of ignition. So what they're relying on is circumstantial evidence, which actually is enough in a case, and deductive reasoning. So since SCE has not offered up an alternate theory, that is a de facto admission of fault. Period. Now, they're going to continue to drag this out because lawyers are in charge, and there's a lot of money on the line. America goes on to say, absent additional evidence, SCE believes that its equipment could have been associated with the ignition of the Eaton Fire. Daniel Firecopter says, nothing needs to be tested, just a waste of time and money. It's clear the power line started it, especially seeing the videos. 100%, I agree. And what's frustrating about this, we're 9 months in, right? Think about all the victims. Now, we've talked about this ad nauseum with the Palisades fire. What about all the victims in Altadena? Even though this is a very straightforward case, we know what's going on, but like they're still dragging their heels on this. Everybody's paying rent right now somewhere, or they're crashing at a homie's place. And the thing is, here's the main difference between the Palisades and Altadena. There's a lot more resources in the Palisades. Okay. Now I've always pushed back against this idea that everybody's loaded the Palisades. Like my family who lives there, or lived there, I should say, before everything burned down, middle-class family, they've been there forever. There's so much generational ownership in the Palisades that you really can't just assume that it's just the Anthony Hopkins and the Billy Crystals out there. There's a mix, okay? But that said, still, most of these people, they either still have money in the coffers and they can afford to rent, even though nobody should have that burden for this long. People in Altadena don't necessarily have the same amount of resources. And you are seeing a lot of sales in Altadena, a lot of people suffering and getting pushed out through attrition, and they're already selling. So this needs to get wrapped up. So I'm with Daniel Firecopter. I think this is a huge waste of time and money, and people are really suffering. They need to wrap this up, like really quickly. The Forest Service sustained fire suppression costs and resources damages exceeding $40 million. So you got to understand that America is not suing for the homes. They're suing to recoup their costs, essentially, for fighting the fire. The resource damages to the United States include, but are not limited to, loss of and damage to timber, trees, vegetation, habitat, wildlife, watershed, and earth protection, property, improvement and archaeological site damage, scenic and aesthetic values and views, environmental damages, loss of use and recreation, and soil damage and erosion. This is stuff that you're going to have a reckoning with all this stuff for a decade. Okay, so all of this stuff, it's totally legit that they sue for damages and get relief. This fire damage also caused needs for mitigation, rehabilitation, and reforestation measures in burned areas, as well as for measures to protect burned areas and adjacent habitat. That's exactly what I just said. Pursuant to California Health and Safety Code, the United States is entitled to recover its administrative, investigative, accounting, and collection costs, as well as interest and late payment charges, in addition to other damages arising from the Eaton Fire. I love that they included this. There has to be some kind of consequence for dragging your heels for 9 months. By charging interest and late payment charges, I like this. There's now a penalty associated with taking this long. Otherwise, what restitution is there? What compulsory measures do you have as a plaintiff to try to get SCE, especially when the governor's got SCE's back no matter what? How do you prompt them to move forward with this? The United States has made a demand on SCE for payment of the costs and damages incurred by the United States to suppress the Eaton Fire and to undertake emergency rehabilitation efforts. SCE has not paid any part of the sum demanded by the United States. Now, this is the Angeles National Forest, run by the great, the legendary, the next fire chief of America, Bobby Garcia. That's just what I hope. I love Bobby. He's great. On January 7th, SCE negligently and in violation of law ignited the Eaton Fire, thereby setting fire to or allowing fire to be set to National Forest System lands within the Angeles National Forest. The Eaton Fire destroyed property of the United States and caused the United States to incur fire suppression costs, property, natural resource damages, and other damages, including intangible damages to the environment, to be established at trial. SCE is liable for all damages to the United States resulting from the Eaton Fire, including its fire suppression costs, damages for injury to federal property, natural resource damages, and the United States Administrative, Investigative, Accounting, and Collection costs under California Health and Safety Code. Now, this last part, they talk about an amount to be established at trial. What does that mean? They are asking for a jury trial. This is good. I like this. They want a jury trial. They're very confident they are going to win this. They want this to go amongst the locals. They want the wrath of the locals to be determining the relief in this case. Now, I would like to add a wrinkle to this. One thing that America did not list in this lawsuit, they're trying to recoup damages for injury to federal property and natural resource damages. We talked about Fernie on Texas Canyon. He responded to the Eaton Fire. Texas Canyon had to go down into the urban interface where they're sucking in toxic chemical smoke. Fernie then developed cancer. What is it? He's got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a very aggressive kind of cancer, is this giant, like apple-sized chunk in his lung. He's been out for the entire fire season. His health is obviously at hazard. Are we going to see any compensation for that? I'm a little bit shocked that America is not looking after its employees. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that, though, given how they've treated our forestry technicians for decades. Maybe it shouldn't surprise me that they aren't trying to recoup expenses for injury to federal employees while on that fire. You know, we talked about the PFAS chemicals earlier. There is an issue with firefighters where essentially in certain agencies, you'll have presumed illness, right? So if you're a firefighter, you retire at 55 and you get cancer. They presume that illness came from your job. And I think it's a rational presumption, of course. Because of that, it should be covered by the employer, right? It's like workman's comp. They don't necessarily have this with the feds. And this is a big problem. A lot of these dudes develop cancers. The scary thing is they're developing these cancers during their career. And we need to make sure that these are considered presumed illnesses from work. Otherwise, they're going to get left out to dry and they're going to get completely overwhelmed by these medical expenses. So anyway, hopefully that gets amended. I'd like to see them try to pursue some kind of compensation for, injury to their employees. I feel like that would be a smart thing to do. Now, on this subject of justice being delayed, that equals justice is denied. We were told, remember early on, when people like me, annoying people like me, were warning about how it was going to take 12 years to rebuild the Palisades. You know, we've seen it before, takes forever. And especially in a place like Southern California and Los Angeles, government hates you so much. They want it to be as painful for you as humanly possible. I got a lot of pushback from people who said, no, we're already filing our permits. We'll be back in like 8 to 9 months. Guys, you have no clue how bad it is. But what's so frustrating is that Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, they made all this hullabaloo about how they were fast tracking everything. Oh, we're cutting the CEQA process. We're cutting permits and we're going to fast track everything. Like promise. And they did just enough to like bat down that furor in the wake of the fire where like, dude, everyone's realizing how long this is going to take. They did just enough to kind of like hush, put it away. Now the reality is setting in. And what does it look like? Well, don't listen to me, listen to the experts.
Which means that the permit will take, how long do you think it will take?
So we're about to get our first permit this week. We're, I think, almost 6 months, 5.5 months into it. And that was they're adding 10% to their house.
So you think the permitting process, but by what you're seeing right now, it's going a lot longer.
No, and that's why I think this is going to take a lot longer than most people think it's going to take to build. And that's really just going to dishearten people, which I think is going to make them want to sell.
What about you, Ken? How's the permitting going in Palisades?
It's the same. I mean, Gary's right. We've achieved 3 permits so far. We probably have 60 or 70 clients moving ahead. But we're on the very, very front end of permits. LADBS has managed to acculturate a climate of no. Their answer to everything historically is no. Go away, come back, and try again. And that's not going to get you anywhere going forward in this circumstance. You need a culture of problem solving. And you're basically going to ask the same people who have said no for years as a policy and as a profession to turn on a dime and solve problems. I don't see that it's going to happen, and it's not happening yet. But there will be a point where the dam breaks and everybody rushes forward to do something. And at that point, it goes back to our conversation of how many contractors are available, how many materials are available. One of my clients said, the only way I'm going to make money or I'm going to get whole out of this situation is if I go buy a lumber yard and just sit on it for 2 years and then charge people 100% markup. And he was right.
It's interesting. You're talking about building a safety, and once you get past that, you haven't even gone to utilities yet.
Right.
Let's say nowadays you finish a house in the city of Los Angeles with building and safety, you get your power release to come and connect the power and have permanent power on your home. It takes, after you pass your final inspection, it takes them 2.5 to 3 months to come and connect the power. So your home is juiced and you can actually live in it.
I love it. You guys notice how Patriot Sparky was in here before that moment in the clip where he says SEE takes 2 months to spot a meter on an existing structure, 2 months to get you on schedule. It's a horror show with SEE. And then sure enough, like 90 seconds later, it's exactly what the dude is saying. On top of the fact, okay, he's saying that like we just got our first permit today. We're in September. He's saying it's a 6-month process. Now we talked about this last night where it's like the baseline is 6 months just for your permitting. And then on top of that, there's all this extra stuff in the utilities. As Sparky's pointing out, dude, it's a nightmare. So even after your home is done, it's going to take you months just to get that thing juiced. And then on top of that, if you want to have fire sprinklers in your house, you have to change your utility connection to the water as well. So most people have a 3/4 pipe. They're going to need a 1-inch pipe to accommodate sprinklers. How long does that take? 3-4 months at least. And then you're competing with God knows how many people all at the same time. And the other thing they talked about is the driving costs of all of the equipment and the materials. This is, dude, first off, I don't know if you guys have done any construction in the last few years, but I have, because I bought a new house. Well, it wasn't new, but it was new to me. I bought a house in 2021 out here in Tennessee. Now, I've renovated 3 homes in my life by myself. I know what it costs. I know what lumber costs. I know what nails cost. Dude, the price of everything has like tripled just in the last few years. Since like all the government shutdowns, since they decided to shut down the entire world, the cost of rebuilding is so much more expensive than I think people realize. And everybody is underinsured, so they are going to be eating it really hard. And then when you have this much demand in one small concentrated area for all of these resources, like the building materials, it's going to be nightmarish. So on top of the waiting, guys, it's really bad. It's really bad. And you notice what this dude was saying. He's talking about how in LA, they just have a culture of no. And they've established this big behemoth that's just so accustomed to moving slowly, and they just don't care about you. And they grind you to a pulp with this whole process. The idea that they're suddenly just going to, Gav hands, they're going to come in with the Gavin hands, and they're going to just cut all the red tape, with his Gav hands that he's always doing. He's just going to cut the red tape, and all of a sudden it's going to just go, what's all that stupid shit that he does? He's always like doing stuff like this, and then the thumb out, but dancing like together, like he's grating cheese at the Olive Garden. You're just going to come in with your Gav hands. You're just going to cut all that red tape. No, it's not how this works. And all of that was honey dicking. Early on, right after the fire hit, when these scumbags were telling you, oh, no, we're cutting all the red tape with my Gav hands. No, they're not. They're not. None of that's happening. These people are going to be stuck in construction purgatory for God knows how long. And, Spencer, he disagrees with me when I say it's going to take 12 years. He's like, fuck that, dude. It's going to take 50. He's starting to convince me he might be right on this. It's going to be really bad. Patriot Sparky is saying nobody wants shelf stock. That's why the wait. Yeah, dude. He also says California building code changes every 2 years. Extreme changes in 2 years. Yeah, dude. This is another thing. It's like so many people, they were grandfathered in. Anyone who's ever done a renovation and you invite the inspectors into your home, man, is that a nightmare. Because once you open that door, if they walk down the hallway to your bathroom to go inspect your bathroom and they see something along the way that's out of code, that has nothing to do with the reason they're there, if they see it, you have to now bring it up to code, right? So you have all of this stuff that you were grandfathered in on. Oh, you're screwed now. The other thing they touched on is a lot of people are choosing to do 110%. First off, I don't like the idea of increasing the density there. I don't think people should be doing that. Additionally, if you increase the footprint of your home, if you choose that 110% option that they are allowing, they are going to reassess the property tax value of your home. If you keep it in the same footprint, you don't get reassessed, apparently. They'll probably change that because these people are scumbags. And then, of course, the city of LA is going to have to pay to holy hell when Alexander Robertson's lawsuit finally goes through, and they have to pay because they're on the hook for this fire. Then they're gonna try to collect as much money as they can. They're gonna raise everybody's property taxes for sure. Patriot Sparky says, I was doing a water plant in Clarksville, Tennessee. I love Clarksville, by the way. It's about 45 minutes from us. Our distribution panels were 150-week lead time. Don't get me started on special 600 amp or larger long lead times. That's the other factor here. So obviously, look, when I was out in the Palisades, you see a lot of these dudes, the logo that you see on his shirt, you see Opus Builder signs everywhere. It's a gold rush for these guys. These guys are going to make so much money. It's crazy. So this thing wasn't a tragedy for everybody. It's a tragedy for the residents, but these people who are building these homes, dude, it's like a NASCAR race. You see their advertising just everywhere, just huge banners for Opus Builders and all these other builders. They're going to try to consolidate their efforts to expedite this as much as possible, right? So they're going to order as many things in bulk as possible. They understand what the lead times are. So they're going to try to get ahead of the curve, and they're going to order stuff in anticipation of the permits getting through. They're not going to wait till the permits come through. But there are a lot of people who are waiting. They are waiting. They're not filing for their permits yet because they still don't know what's going to happen with their insurance, because government is dragging its heels with the ATF report and getting this lawsuit through. Now, in 5 days, we have another hearing, so thank God for that. But we're still dragging. We're still dragging, right? The United States of America, the Forest Service, had to file a lawsuit on the Eaton Fire even before they've determined a cause, because they're like, dude, we can't fucking wait anymore. We need that money, Lebowski. So this is going to just continue to grind people to a pulp. It's like, I feel so badly for the residents there because it's like they're getting it from all angles. They can't get relief anywhere. It's unbelievable. This is an absolute Kafkaesque nightmare. And I fucking hate seeing this happen. I hate it. And you know what? I heard about this. Maybe I'll get to this tomorrow. I'm going to save this for tomorrow. Let's get to like, I want to show you something that I shot in the Palisades the other day. I want to show you something because for some reason, we still have morons everywhere who seem to think that it's not a problem that the reservoir was offline. And even the people who recognize that the reservoir being offline is a problem, they tend to conflate that issue with the hydrants going dry. The thing that I always point out is, look, Altadena lost water too, okay? Ventura lost water on the Thomas fire. This does tend to happen. You're going to lose pressure because when all the homes, all their water mains are blowing up, it's going to be an issue. So that isn't necessarily the fault of the reservoir, although the reservoir probably would have maintained pressure a little bit longer, would have extended the life of those hydrants a bit longer. The real crux of the issue, the real Achilles heel here, where the reservoir being empty was because the helipad was not operational. There are two helipads in Palisades because there are two reservoirs in the Palisades. And just so it's clear, because some people still don't get this, they still think that the Palisades reservoir, the San Ynez Reservoir, is a dip site. It is not a dip site. It's got a helipad, okay? It has a plastic cover over it, so you can't dip out of it. The helicopters land on the concrete pad in front of the reservoir, which I'm going to show you in a second, and then they reload with a hose. The reload time is effectively the same. It's about 60 seconds on a Firehawk. So now, I want to show you something. I did a flight with my drone from the Palisades Reservoir to the general area of origin of the fire. Okay? I want to show you guys how long it would take if they were able to reload at the San Ynez Reservoir. As far as I know, nobody's done this. Let's just take a look so you can see visually how far away or how close this reservoir is to the point of origin of this fire. And I did a flight with my drone to simulate what it would be like. Now, I put a timer on this so we can see this, all right? Now, I want to point out a few things. First off, hold on, before we continue. See that pad there on the right? See that pad in the lower right? That's where the helipad is. That's where the copters land. They can also land over here on the left. And you need to have an engine up there tending to the helipad, and that's where they reload. And they're very quick, very, very quick, okay? It takes about 60 seconds. So now, I want you to look up where that sun is shining through the lens. That is the general area of origin of the fire. Those hills above the highlands, that summit area. Get rid of this. So now, a few things to note. You can see just how close that is to the area of the fire. It's right there. It is right there. Now, this drone that I have, it flies about 30 to 35 miles an hour, okay? A Firehawk, I believe it can fly 120 miles per hour, all right? So it flies 4 times the speed of what we're flying right now. So when we watch as this time elapses, and you can see just how close we are to where the fire broke out, remember that a Firehawk would travel this in a quarter of that time. A quarter of that time. So now we got to think, all right, let's add in a little extra time for acceleration and deceleration, right? So they're going to take off. They're not going to be hitting 120 miles per hour right out of the gate, right? They lean into their takeoffs. They never come straight up. But they're going to lean out. They're going to accelerate. So let's add on, what do you say, like an extra 30 seconds for acceleration. And then they gotta find where they're gonna drop, right? So they're gonna decelerate as they get closer. And then we gotta add 60 seconds for their reload time. Now, when I started this flight, because of the range of my drone, I started it from behind the reservoir so we could see the pad, so you can see the actual reservoir in the shot. And I only flew to the equivalent just shy of the general area of origin. So I didn't get like right up to the hill where you can see like right where that sun is shining. That's right where the fire started, okay? I didn't quite get there. I like shifted it back. So that way we're starting behind the reservoir so we can see it, but it's the same distance if you were to just cheat it forward, right? And how long does it take for us to get there? A little over 2 minutes. So now let's add in 60 seconds. If it took 2 minutes for a 30-mile-per-hour drone to get there, who's good at math? If a Firehawk can travel at 120 miles per hour, how fast is that? Right? What's 1/4 of 2 minutes? I'm going to give you guys a second because I know to never do math live on the air. Never. It's 30 seconds, right? It's 30 seconds. So if we were to add 60 seconds for reload, now we're at 90 seconds. Let's add 30 seconds for acceleration and 30 seconds for hooking back around after your drop. So now we're looking at 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Now, Ken nailed it, 30 seconds. We talked about me being on a hand crew yesterday. Yeah, you're not allowed to do math. You're not able to do math if you're on a hand crew, or you're on a hand crew because you're not able to do math. It's like the chicken and the egg. Now, just so we can get a sense of what we're looking at distance-wise. Now, you can see visually, it's like, it is so close, dude. It is right there. You think of how convenient it would have been to be able to reload right there. And this is why they're typically pretty successful with previous Palisades fires, like the one that I was on in 2019. They beat the shit out of it right away because they were able to reload right there. Scoopers are dipping out of the ocean. It's just like, it was an air show the whole time. Now, let's look at this distance to understand how far away it is. So that way we can get a sense of like, all right, how long does it take? It took 2 minutes, AKA in a Firehawk, that's a 3 minute cycle, right? That's a 3 minute load and return. A minute reloading, 30 seconds there, 30 seconds back, 2 total minutes. And then we're adding on 30 seconds of acceleration time, 30 seconds of orienting over the fire. Now, the general area of origin is right here, okay? And let's see, how do we do this? We measure distance. Let's measure distance to the helispot at the reservoir. It's 1.3 miles, okay? Now, 3 minute load and return. It's a 3 minute cycle. If you've got 3 helicopters, that means you're dropping water on this thing every minute. Every minute. That's about as good as it gets. Every single minute, you've got another dump on this thing. Where did they have to fill up? Remember this number. It's 1.3 miles for a 3 minute turnaround time. Let's do, was it Camp 9 or is it Camp 8 on Rambla Pacifica? Here's where they had to load. Here's where they had to fly instead, all the way over here. So now you can just see visually how far that is. And just so you know, it wasn't just Camp 8 at 69 Bravo. It was also Pepperdine. They were also reloading out of Pepperdine. That's 9.7 miles away. 9.7 miles away. Now let's reset this. We are going to measure from the general area of origin to Camp 9. Let's get it there. 5.87 miles. All right, so let's just call it 6 miles. So you've got 1.3 miles to this reservoir, 6 miles to this helispot at 69 Bravo. Who wants to do the math? Do the math for me. Right? So if you have a 3 minute cycle going this far, how long is it going to take you to go this far? 6 miles versus 1.3 miles. Let's just call it 1.5, just for the sake of ease. So that's 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. It's 4 times the distance, right? Times 2. Times 2. How long would that take? So if it took them 30 seconds to fly 1.5 miles, then what's it going to take over here? It's going to take 2 minutes. So that's 2 minutes here. And then remember, we're going to add 30 seconds of decel and acceleration. So that's 3 minutes. And then we're going to add, obviously, 2 minutes for the return. So that's 5 minutes. And then a minute reload. That's 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Now we're already spreading things out. And then they had to dip out of Pepperdine, which is 9.5 miles away. And you can see how it starts to get out of your control. Looking at it like this, you really get a sense of, here's the reservoir. Look how much farther away this was. Look how much farther away it was. The other element to this that would speed up your load and return cycle here is that you have eyes on the fire from the reservoir. Look at this shot. I deliberately started it behind the reservoir so you could see their field of view. You can see the point of origin very clearly right here. So the way that they're going to come in here, they're going to swoop around and land facing the origin of the fire. So the pilots are already looking at where their drop is going to be. So they go straight to it, straight to it. If you are coming in from 69 Bravo, you have to get closer to the incident, swoop around, find where you're going to drop, and then you're going to unload. It's, the more I think about it, the more frustrating it gets, honestly. And the thing is, if they were pulling out of the right here in this shot, you would see at least one other helicopter behind him. You'd see at least one other helicopter right behind him. But instead, he's all by himself. You can see Helco sort of at the top of the shot, but he's all by himself. And if we were on that 3-minute load and return, you'd have a conveyor belt of water on this thing. You might have caught it. You might have caught it. Cute math, but there were no copters, bro. I forgot about that. Yeah, some wise guy on the internet told me that there were no copters, bro. Now, I'm going to touch on one more thing before we sign off. I thought about discussing this today, but I didn't want to get mad. We started this stream with that clip that I play over and over again. I don't mean to be repetitive, but it's just such an issue that it keeps showing its head over and over and over and over and over again. Do you guys remember when Gavin Newsom was on Sean Ryan? You remember that? He said something really interesting, and I'm going to play that. But the reason why I got pissed off today, because I watched it's like the California Forest Resilience Task Force, right? So this is under Gavin Newsom, and this is his organization that is essentially there to make it look like they're doing prescribed fire when they're really not. Okay. That's like the most generous way I can describe it. And it's a lot of masturbatory, patting themselves on the back about how much prescribed fire they're doing. The word treatment gets thrown around a lot, and they never actually tell you how many prescribed fire acres they do. I'm going to have something on this conference because they cited one particular group that had received $10 million in grants. And then when I looked into how much prescribed fire they'd actually done, it was something on the order of 300 acres. Now, 300 acres, $10 million. Where's the fucking money going? Where's the money going? Now, I've gotten acclimated to accepting the reality that Gavin Newsom is always just going to lie about how much prescribed fire that he's doing, right? He's always going to talk about how good it is. This is his shtick, right? He always misleads the public about wildfire prevention efforts. This is his thing. He always lies about it. I'm very used to this, how California agencies are always going to talk about how much they're doing, and they're really not doing it. So it's sort of just like, okay, they're letting us down. They're derelict. They don't want the liability, or they simply don't want to do it, or they actually don't care. It's one of those things. But when I saw this conference and I saw them bragging about giving $10 million to this one group that's done 300 acres of prescribed fire, something more pernicious popped into my head. Is our prescribed fire program a big money laundering scheme? I want to play this clip from Sean Ryan.
Billions and billions of dollars. We've 10x'd our investments in that space, 10x'd it. From the day I got in, the first executive order I signed as governor of California was around vegetation and forest management. Waived CEQA again. Did an emergency order to fast track these efforts.
Did he fast track these efforts, guys? Did you notice what he said? Now, he always does this 10x, 10x. It's like his Gollum tick. It's like Gollum, Gollum. He always does this. 10x. It's his favorite thing to say. So what is he saying? Is he saying that he 10x'd the amount of prescribed fire done? And notice the timeline. He said it was the first thing that he did as governor. The first thing. When was he governor? He was elected a few days before the Camp Fire, right? And he was sworn in 2 months later. That's 2019. 2019. We are now in 2025. We have only decreased the amount of treatment done since he issued that order. Apparently, it was the first thing that he did when he got into office. So if he issued that order to increase the amount of burning, and he put billions into this work, and he 10x'd the budget for this, and yet we've only done less prescribed fire than ever before in those years, where's the money going? Where's the money going? And like, I'm not trying to say this as a joke. Like, when I was watching this conference and I saw some of the figures that they're giving with grants, and I'm looking up how much burning these grant recipients are actually doing, we know that California is the most expensive place to do mitigation work. We know it. The upper end of the cost per acre in California is about $1,000 per acre. That's for prescribed fire. Okay, it is the most expensive place in the country to do this work. Mechanical thinning, manual thinning is far more expensive. It's the most expensive way to treat any acreages, right? So that's like $3,000 an acre. So let's say that, and this particular grant recipient, they do not do manual thinning, they do prescribed fire, okay? Let's take the upper end of that cost. They've done 300 acres, and at the high end of what it costs to burn in California, $1,000 an acre, that should be $300,000. We're going to continue to do some math live on air. Where in the fuck did that other $9.7 million go? Does anyone have an answer for that? Does anyone have receipts? Where is this money going? Friends of the Milkweed Plant probably landed a few $100 million super PAC. I swear, I need to know who Super PAV is. This dude is way too smart. I feel like he knows something. I'm gonna find out who this guy is, because he knows too much, dude. So if you're giving an organization $10 million and they're burning 300 acres, that should cost $300,000. Dude, fuck it. Let's say they're doing mechanical thinning, the most expensive version, and it's 3 times that cost. 3x. That's what, $900,000? Where's the other $9.1 million going? Where's it going? If he's 10x'd the budget for prescribed fire since he's been governor, and yet they've reduced the amount of actual prescribed fire, where's the fucking money going? Shouldn't you see at least 10 times the amount of acres? You're not seeing that. Now, last year, they were able to burn, because of the Forest Service. The Forest Service actually took the lead on this. They burned like 72,000 acres. And they set a record, a modern record. That was only 14,000 acres of improvement. 14,000. That is not 10x. Where's this money going? We'll talk about this more in depth, because I wanted to gather my thoughts on it before I lose my shit. But we see this in California all over the place. We see this with the homeless industrial complex, where taxpayer money is just being milked in a money laundering scheme. And there's kickbacks for local government that makes ordinances requiring homeless people to be processed through these NPOs, nonprofit organizations, that are making a killing. And it's this big circle jerk. We see with fire aid, hundreds of millions of dollars raised, ostensibly to go directly to the fire victims. And instead, dude, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars going into Gavin Newsom's campaign. George Clooney had an organization that was a recipient of fire aid money, and he just donated like $200,000 to Gavin Newsom's campaign. How the fuck is this legal? So it's not unique or surprising or new that there's crony capitalism going on in California government. It is the most corrupt government on the planet. Like I would say, it's the most corrupt in America, and it has surpassed Chicago in terms of just gangster government. I think this might be the most corrupt government on planet Earth. I've never seen anything like this. But at the very least, I thought, well, the whole lack of prescribed fire, it's just because people lack the balls and the initiative to get it done. And everybody's just scared of liability. And that's the real issue here. Dude, I think they're laundering money through the prescribed fire program. I think like the wildfire industrial complex is worse than I thought. Dude, this was weighing heavily on me all day. Because, dude, how do we undo this? Am I crazy? Like, does somebody have an explanation for where this money might be going? If they've 10x'd the budget, and they've not 10x'd the results, they've not doubled the results, they've not even 50%ed the results, where could this money possibly be going? Does anyone have an answer? I'm trying to draw this out to give you guys time to give me an answer. Otherwise, like, dude, I think we need the feds to investigate this. Now, the feds are going to be investigating some of this stuff. I'm going to add this to the list. Now, initially, the things on the list for the feds to investigate were obviously the cause of the Palisades fire, the fire aid stuff. I'm going to put this on their radar. I think there might be some impropriety going down with the prescribed fire stuff. I don't understand how we sink billions of dollars into this and nothing changes. Nothing gets better. Nothing gets done. What other explanation is there other than there's grift, right? You saw the high-speed rail. How many billions of dollars did they sink into that? They don't have a single line of track down. Superpad, you definitely have some homework. Daniel Firecopter says the honorable man is onto something. Dude, I don't want this to be true. Like I said, like I'm not trying to be melodramatic here, but somebody sent me the presentation that they were doing. So there's a conference going down in the Inland Empire right now. And it's the Joint Task Force on Forest Resilience. And it's all these prescribed fire people. And they're bragging about these things, about all these grant recipients. And I just, while they're talking and I'm listening in on the Zoom, I'm like looking up, okay, I'm looking on their viewer, how much has this organization actually done with prescribed fire? And I see 300 acres. I'm like, there's no way that's it, right? And then I saw, oh no, there's a project with 1,200 acres. But then you look into it, it's actually the Forest Service did 90% of that. They only did like 30 acres on that. So then you have to ask yourself, like, wait a second, where's this money going? Where's it going, dude? I want to be proven wrong on this. Trust me. I don't want to have like stumbled across some money laundering. I would so much rather know that maybe it's like there's just a lag time and they need to train up burn bosses. Please tell me it's something like that. I want somebody to tell me, and if there are any journalists left in this state, can somebody look into this and ask these questions? Because these questions are not being asked at these conferences. These are just these masturbatory conferences where they're all patting each other on the back and they're talking about cultural burning and all this stuff that it's like, look, I'm Native American. I fully appreciate the cultural aspect of this stuff. But dude, at the end of the day, we just got to get fire on the ground. Like, can we stop with all this performative shit and just get millions of acres done? Please, please. 30 to 300 is 10x. That's true. The only thing they 10x is they count their acreage 10 times. Oh my God. So guys, please prove me wrong on this, because it's been bothering me all day since I was watching that conference. Please prove me wrong. I want to be wrong about this, but I can't shake this thought that Gavin Newsom doing all this and injecting all this taxpayer money into this, and we don't see any results. Dude, if it's not money laundering, you should at least be fucking pissed that your taxpayer dollars are not good dollars, that it's not being put to use. The one exception that I will grant that I'm aware of, aside from like what Zeke Lunder's doing, and I think a lot of that is just Zeke taking initiative, and that dude's badass. So I'm not talking about people like Zeke. Napa Firewise, they have proven results. We can see the receipts from their work, right? We saw it on the Picket Fire earlier, where even the fire chief in CAL FIRE was crediting their work for establishing pre-attack lines for them. and dozer line that they used as access to get their Charlie Strike teams up there. Okay, so Napa Firewise actually has results, and you can see it. You can see the impact. You can see it immediately on that fire. I mean, they did an outstanding job corralling that fire, and that is thanks to Napa Firewise. So they are a grant recipient, but there's also so much initiative from all the vintners on the ground and the local homeowners who are sick of losing everything. So that's an example of like good dollars, Napa Firewise. But some of these other places, I don't see the product of their work. Please tell me if I have a blind spot. Like, I honestly want to be proven wrong on this. So please look into this and tell me your experience in your areas, because what I love about this audience is like, you guys are all over the place. Some of you guys are on the ANF. Some of you guys are down near Orange County. Some of you guys are way up in like Siskiyou. Some of you guys are in Butte. Tell me what you're seeing. I know some of you have seen like little roadside firing operations at Cal Fire. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about legitimate projects, the kinds that would cost millions of dollars, that would justify this 10x of budget going into it. I may have more to say on this tomorrow, but like I said, I don't like getting out ahead of my skis, but just something smells weird about all this, dude. How do you have 10x the budget and less results? Unless it's money laundering. Anyway, on that note, man, this is a dark episode. This is a dark episode. That's the permit purgatory, everything taking forever, all these lawsuits. Just a reminder, I do believe the next hearing for the Palisades Fire lawsuit, thanks to Alexander Robertson, the Great, I believe it is September 9th. Okay, so you got something to look forward to. There's also a few other very interesting things happening. September 9th, September 10th, and September 11th that you will never forget. And I will make sure that you never forget. All right? Because I'm a human being, damn it. And in this dystopian world of AI, the only way to prove that you're human is to do it live. Thanks for doing it live with me, guys.